time to worship you in song. Lord, as we get ready to worship you in the study of your word, we pray, God, that you'd speak to us now, that you would make our hearts ready to hear from you. Lord, that you'd give us a will that is ready to change whatever you say. Lord, just have your word have its perfect work. And Lord, I pray that you'd fill us all with your spirit to give us insight and understanding. Fill me with your spirit, Lord, to speak your word tonight. Go before us, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Good evening. Go ahead and have a seat. We are continuing on in our study through Exodus. The goal is to get through chapters 33 and 34 tonight. They are kind of longer chapters, but they really go together, so it'd be hard to separate them. Couple announcements. The angel tree gifts, if you could try to have them here by Sunday, if you haven't brought them already, that would be wonderful. I think all the angels except maybe like 10 out of like 122 were taken. So there was a lot, or I think it was that much. I don't know. Whatever it was a pretty big number. And so anyway, we're really looking forward to how that goes. But if you can bring them Sunday, continue to be patient with us as we check the kids in the back and kind of get through all the, figuring out how to check the kids in there. Be patient with that. Christmas Eve services are going to be in the morning, because it's on a Sunday. Christmas Eve is on a Sunday, so it'll be the 8:30 and the 10:30 morning services, so note that. And then, not tomorrow, Saturday, is the parent night out. So if you haven't signed up to drop your kids off here and you go out on a date, make sure to sign up for that. So you could sign up at the foyer counter. We would like a little bit of a head count. It would be nice to get a head count so that way we make sure we have enough food for everybody, for all the kids. Or else the last ones to sign up don't eat. Just kidding. Well, no, they'll eat. They'll eat all right. It's going to be, your parents didn't sign you up. What do you want me to do? Just kidding. Okay, so last week we studied chapter 32, which was one of those difficult chapters in the book of Exodus. Could have been, we said, one of the shortest chapters in the Bible. That the people, right, Moses has been up on Mount Sinai. He's getting the directions from God, how to build the tabernacle, all the different things, and he's getting all this stuff from the Lord, and the people grow weary after a time, and they go, what's happened to this Moses fellow? Where's he at? And what should have happened is they should have said, well, we should just be a little patient. But they didn't say that. Instead, they said, make us gods to go before us. And Aaron could have squashed it and said, you rebels, go pray. Go back home and pray. But instead, he goes, well, then give me your gold. And I think we saw that, what is it? He received the gold, he molded the gold, he fashioned the gold, and then he presented the gold before them, and he said, this is your God. And then the people got out of hand. And so we saw what happened there. Moses comes down from the mountain. He breaks the 2 tablets of stone that God had given him. He's frustrated. He grinds up the golden calf into powder, puts it in the water, makes them drink it. It's like, this is your sin, man. And he looks at Aaron. He goes, man, what did these guys do to you that you'd bring such an evil upon them, to lead them into sin that way, to worship another God? And then we see the heart of Moses as just God's leader. He goes back to God and he goes, will you please forgive them? It's very similar, and we see it. Jesus says it obviously the best, but then even guys martyred after Jesus say the same thing, that idea of, Lord, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Right? They don't know. The people are fickle. And so Moses kind of goes to bat for them. And even to the point where he says, Lord, if you'll not forgive them, then blot me out of your book. And the Lord says, he goes, no, those who have sinned, whoever has sinned against me, I'll blot him out of my book. And so we get to this place where it does say that the Lord plagued the people because of what they did. And then we pick up here now in chapter 33, verse 1. We're going to go kind of just bit by bit here because it is a longer section. So verses 1 through 6, it says, then the Lord said to Moses, depart and go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying to your descendants, I'll give it. I'll send my angel before you, and I will drive drive out the Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusite. Go up to a land flowing with milk and honey. For I will not go up in your midst, lest I consume you on the way, for you are a stiff-necked people. When the people heard this bad news, they mourned, and no one put on his ornaments, for the Lord had said to Moses, say to the children of Israel, you are a stiff-necked people. I could come up into your midst in one moment and consume you. Now, therefore, take off your ornaments, that I may know what to do to you. So the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by Mount Horeb. You'll see, again, a familiar thing that it seems like this talk happens between God and Moses multiple times. We talked about it last chapter. You know, when you get home from work, and your wife says to you, do you know what your son did today? That idea. God says to Moses, Moses, he goes, depart, go up with the people whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt. As we get further down, Moses will say, why do you tell me to bring this people out? They are your people, God. And so we'll get into that in just a little bit. But what's happening now is God's going, okay, we're going to get moving soon. You're going to go, he says, to the land that I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He says, I'm going to send my angel before you. I'll drive out, and this is familiar, right? The Canaanite, the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. You're going to go to the land of milk and honey. So God was still going to allow, even after this great sin that just happened of worshiping the golden calf, forgiveness has been given from the Lord, but God's still going to allow them to go to the promised land. He's going to allow them, by God's power, to drive out the inhabitants of the land. God's going to remain faithful to his people because of his own faithfulness, certainly not because of their faithfulness. And we see that in the New Testament. It'll get spelled out a little more clearly that God cannot deny his own character. The Bible tells us, even when we're faithless, he remains faithful. He cannot deny himself. But we see something very crucial here. God says, but I'm not going with you. He says, I'm going to send my angel ahead to take you, but I'm not going, he says, because I'll consume you. Like what just happened was not a small thing. We're talking a span of weeks here, like probably 40 days prior. He had given the people command. He had given them the 10 commandments. The people said, all that God has said we will do. Moses is gone for 40 days. The people start worshiping another God. This is grave sin. And so what happens then is God says, this is me being gracious here. I'm not going in your midst because you guys keep doing this kind of stuff. I'm going to wipe you out right there. He says, he said he'll send his angel to lead them. Now, some of your Bibles might have angel capitalized. Some of yours might not. And commentators really are a little divided here on whether or not this is like the angel of the Lord as is spoken of in other places early on in the book of Exodus, most recently chapter 23, verse 20, or if it's just a regular angel, the angel of the Lord that we see in chapter 23, verse 20, and we've talked about this before, is that kind of pre-incarnate Christ, that it's the Son of God, that it's what we might call a Christophany or a theophany of a place where, we know that Jesus didn't just show up on Christmas morning and poof, out of thin air, there he comes. He's been there since eternity. We know that. And so there are times, and the reason we know it from other places in Scripture is you see the attributes of God in this angel. And so that could be, and one of them is to forgive sin. And so we know that has to be the second person of the Trinity. Or it could just be a regular angel that's going to go before, as if there was such thing as just a regular angel, but still a minister of God who is going to lead the people. Still, this is still a good deal. Whether it's the Son of God or whether it's an angel, it's still a good thing compared to having nothing to go before them. But you imagine that these people, since they left Egypt, have had that pillar of cloud and that pillar of fire to lead them. they have heard the voice of God at Mount Sinai. That when he descended upon the mountain, you remember, and we had the mountains covered in cloud and smoke and fire and lightning and all that, all that's happening there, and the sound of the trumpet, and they hear the 10 Commandments and they say all that God has said we will do. And now God goes, I'm that pillar of fire, that cloud, I'm staying here. I'm not going any further with you, lest you're consumed. And the people react in a pretty proper way, right? Is that they remove their ornaments. Now I don't know how much the people knew here, but this was a challenge for Moses now and the rest of the nation. God told them that they would still go to the promised land, but that he would not remain with them in that close personal way that he had been. If they were going to be satisfied with this arrangement, it would kind of prove that, much like in the New Testament during Jesus' ministry, that they're just following God for what he can give them. And they'll be satisfied with the gifts that God gives, but not the giver himself. And so, as we begin to see, and we will see with Moses, and I don't know necessarily on behalf of all the people, it's hard to know, but if they kind of challenge back and they do want God's presence, not just his blessings, it would show a genuine heart for God himself. And so this would be the first step towards that spiritual restoration with them. So, verse 4, 5, and 6, it talks about how the people, they heard the bad news, they mourned, and it says no one put on their ornaments because of what God had said. Verse 6, the children of Israel stripped themselves of their ornaments by Mount Horeb. When he says that they're a stiff-necked people in verse 5, the phrase is repeated again. It's already been repeated, but the idea isn't only that they were stubborn, but that they continue to resist God. Right? They continue to resist him. The picture is of an ox or a donkey that resists the farmer and making its neck stiff. And the removal of their jewelry showed outwardly what was happening on the inside, which was sorrow of heart. They realized that they had done wrong. Even in just the taking off of ornaments, right? They're, the rings and all the jewelry that they're wearing. That's what it's talking about here. That it's not a time for a merry heart and celebration. It is a sobering time to realize that their actions have caused God to say, I'm not going with you through the wilderness and to the promised land. What is interesting is in Exodus chapter 35, and we should be there next week, describes how these ornaments went into the building of the tabernacle. And a guy named Cole says the very ornaments that could make a golden idol in the past could now be dedicated to God for the use of his sanctuary. And so the people will have a choice to give that offering in just a couple chapters here. Verse 7 through verse 11, it says, Moses took his tent and pitched it outside the camp, far from the camp, and called it the tabernacle of meeting. And it came to pass that everyone who sought the Lord went out to the tabernacle of meeting, which was outside the camp. So it was, whenever Moses went out to the tabernacle, that all the people rose. Each man stood at the tent door and watched Moses until he had gone into the tabernacle. It came to pass when Moses entered the tabernacle that the pillar of cloud descended and stood at the door of the tabernacle, and the Lord talked with Moses. And the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the tabernacle door, and all the people rose and worshiped, each man in his tent door. So the Lord spoke to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to his friend, and he would return to the camp, but his servant Joshua, the son of Nun, the young man, did not depart from the tabernacle. Now, this isn't the whole tent yet. Like we talked, remember, we've been studying the tabernacle and all that. This, when it's saying this, he's just talking about a tent right now, just kind of, just standard issue, Walmart tent type thing, just the one Moses had been staying in. Probably not a Walmart tent, but this is just Moses' tent, right? And he's going to go put it out there. They're going to call it this for now, because we haven't made the main big tabernacle of meeting and all that kind of stuff. And so Moses' tent where he's going to meet with God. Now Moses takes it outside the camp. Why? Because the camp has been defiled. The camp has been defiled by this worship of a false god. And so God's not going to be there. We know this, that sin separates us from God. That a holy God will not dwell in the midst of sin. Now, God hasn't changed anything about himself, but our proximity, the people's proximity to God, has to change now. because they've brought sin in. It's been defiled. And until that's completely dealt with, then we can't go further. And you know that, just like I know that in our own lives with the Lord, that we can have these times where we allow sin to work its way back into our lives, and we could begin to, maybe not settle accounts very quickly with the Lord and let things linger, and I'll permit a little bit of sin. That part's not as bad or whatever. And there's times where we go, it just kind of seems a distance between me and God. There's that old story of the couple, they're newly married, and they have the pickup truck with the bench seat, and she always gets right in and she sits right next to her husband, and they drive down the road, and there's this real closeness, whatever. And 10, 15 years later, they're driving and she's sitting on the other side of the door, and the guy's driving. She goes, we never sit right next to each other anymore. And the husband goes, I didn't move anywhere, right? There was just that slow drifting. And isn't that the way it is kind of with the Lord sometimes, that we let certain things happen, and all of a sudden it's like we don't have that close fellowship with the Lord. Why? Usually because there's a little bit of sin that's creeped in and stuff that we've said, it's not the worst, it's not whatever. And we would even deceive ourselves in a way, it's not a golden calf. Like, I'm not worshiping any major thing. Well, here in this scenario, this is exactly what happens, is that distance from God is happening. Now, God is still gracious in this. He's still going to set up a place that he can meet with those who want to meet with him. So it says, those who sought the Lord went out there. Those who said, the camp's defiled, but if that's where God is, that's where I'm going to go, right? To say, I'll do what it takes to go fellowship with the Lord. And so Moses, this had to be a thing for him, that he goes outside the camp. He sets his tent out there. We see that Joshua goes with him. Joshua, his assistant, goes with him. And those who desire to be near the Lord can go. So, when the people when Moses would head out there, the people would notice. They'd see him walking. This would be a pretty easy thing to see. Kind of everyone's camping, kind of probably facing a certain way. The main kind of thoroughfare going through, Moses would walk. The people would notice, hey, Moses is going over there. And they would stand, it says, and they would notice. And now all of a sudden there's this kind of renewed, healthy respect for the ministry that God has given Moses. You see, last chapter, right, they had maybe gotten a little tired of Moses, a little tired of what was going on, and as for this guy, what's happened to him? Now when Moses goes, he'd go over there, and then the cloud would come. And this really speaks to God placing his stamp of approval on Moses' ministry. That he's going, I'll meet with my guy. Yeah, he's still my guy. And we're going to see, this is going to creep in as we continue on through these books of the Bible here with the children of Israel out in the wilderness, that there will be times that people go, is it just Moses that God talks to? Can't he talk to any of us? Aren't we so, we're just as special as Moses? And God really places amen on this. He really places his stamp on this and goes, no, Moses is my guy. As Moses goes out of the camp, as he gets into his tent, God descends there and to meet with him. Now, he does say that he speaks to him face to face. That is a figure of speech. We'll see that really clearly by the end of the chapter, that God says, Moses, no one can see my face and live. But he's talking of a closeness. He's talking of relationship. He's talking of fellowship here with Moses. And so now we're going to have this really great back and forth between the Lord and Moses, verses 12 through 17. So Moses gone outside the camp. He's meeting with the Lord. Then Moses said to the Lord, verse 12, see, you say to me, bring up this people, but you've not let me know whom you'll send with me. Yet you've said, I know you by name, and you have found grace in my sight. Now, therefore, I pray, if I have found grace in your sight, show me now your way, that I may know you, and that I may find grace in your sight. And consider that this nation is your people. And he said, the Lord said, my presence will go with you, and I'll give you rest. Then he said, if your presence does not go with us, do not bring us up from here. For how then will it be known that your people and I have found grace in your sight, except you go with us? So we shall be separate, your people and I, from all the people who are upon the face of the earth. And then verse 17 says, so the Lord said to Moses, I will also do this thing that you have spoken, for you have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. Moses is an intercessor now. Right? Moses used to be kind of maybe a little bit of fly by the seat of his pants, maybe when he was back in Egypt. a little bit of like an anger issue when he was back in Egypt. He's become a guy who's ruled by God now. And as God says, okay, I'll send my angel with you, Moses says to him in verse 12, I don't know this angel. I know you. Lord, I've got a history with you. And you remember all that time ago when Moses was out in the wilderness, just tending sheep on the backside of the desert. It's almost like Moses goes, look, I didn't come looking for you. You came looking for me. And you called me, and you said you'd go with me, and you said all this stuff. And since that day, Lord, we've walked hand in hand, step in step. We've gone with each other. I've never gone anywhere and done anything without you. And now you say that you're not going and you're sending an angel. I don't know the angel. I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know what this is. And so he's going to intercede on the basis of what God and who God has said that he is. And so he says, if I found grace in your sight and you know me by name, then show me your way and continued grace in your sight. Lord, if it is as personal as you've said it is, then show me your way. I want to know the direction you say to go. I want to know the way you say to go. Show me your way. I want to see what you're doing and how you're moving. This is really personal stuff. And so God says, okay, I'll go with you. Okay, I'll go with you and I'll give you rest. Now again, and I think I have this kind of written later here, but this isn't one of those type of Moses wins type thing of changing God's mind. We talked about that last week. That in our prayers, we're not changing God's mind. We're aligning ourselves with God's will. And then Moses kind of looks back at the Lord after God says, okay, I'll go with you and I'll give you rest. And Moses goes, like, you'd better be serious. He goes, if your presence doesn't go with us, don't bring us up from here. If you're not serious, if you aren't going, don't move us from here. Or else how else will we know if we really have found grace in your sight? We're supposed to be this holy people, different from everyone else. And the proof of that is your presence with us. And God says, okay, I'll go with you. You have found grace in my sight, and I know you by name. It's a reassurance that God is with his people. And the main thing here is that Moses so badly wants the presence of God going with them. He knows that without God, he is lost. Right? He knew who he used to be, and he knows now who God has made him. And it's this idea of like, once we've tasted of the Lord, once we've known him, it's so hard to go back. That's why it is so uncomfortable for you and I when we're in any type of backslidden state. Whether it's for minutes or whether it's for weeks or whether it's for months or even years, there is still, when we go, yeah, I don't really feel like pressing into God anymore. I'm backing up just a little bit. There's an uneasiness about it. Why? Because you're like, God, if God's not with me, this just doesn't work. And Moses knows. He goes, I want no part of what my life used to look like before you. Right? He had 40 years living in Egypt and all the treasures of Egypt that he could have had, and that wasn't enough. He remembers that. And then he spent another 40 years in the backside of the desert with nothing, and he was just like, my life's over. This is a terrible, I've had everything, I've had nothing, and both are miserable. But then he comes in contact with the Lord God himself. And what happens? He starts to find his true identity and who he really is. And now his identity is wrapped up in the Lord. And so he knows he's lost. I love, Damian Kyle says this, that it's as if Moses says, I don't need Canaan. I don't need land. I don't need milk and honey. I don't need power. I had that stuff in Egypt. I need you. And that's what Moses is looking for at this point. For us, there is nothing, not one thing, even good things that are more important or more valuable than God himself. There's no ministry, there's no thing, there's no family, there's no person, there's no event, there obviously no sin that is more important to us or should be more important to us or anything that could ever be bigger to us than God himself. And my prayer so often, our prayer so often for even just this church, for individuals in this church. My prayer usually goes something along the lines of, God, help us to just know you. Help us to love you. and enjoy you above anything else, to protect our time with you, to help us not think that we could take any steps without you. We pray routinely, guys, that for all of us in this church, that God would protect our time with him and that we would know him more. Why? Because that's where life is found. It's not in what kind of programs we run here. It's not in, how exciting our children's ministry are, or how great the play is going to be that we do in a couple weeks here, how nice the decorations are. We don't care about any of that stuff. It's Jesus, guys. It's our identity needs to be wrapped up in Jesus. I don't want to go a step without him. I've done enough of that. Have you done that even in your walk with God? That you've kind of said, hey, God, I'm going to go do this. Why don't you bless it? And you take a few steps without the blessing of God. And you go, and sometimes God's gracious. He finds a way to redeem it and whatever. But there's usually some lessons to be learned there, and they're not easy ones. But and I hate to quote these songs here, but it's not like, hey, Jesus, be my co-pilot. It's got to be, Jesus, you take the wheel, right? I was going to quote the whole song, take it from my hand, because I can't do this on my own, right? I'm letting go. But that's what it needs to be. God, I don't want to go anywhere that you're not going. Again, I've had enough of that in my life. I don't want any more of that in my life. And so that's where Moses is at, that he's going, so Lord, I just, show me your way if I found grace in your sight. And he goes, okay. But like almost, you had better be serious, Lord. You better be going with us. Now, this kind of answer to this prayer does something in Moses. Because he had asked a couple things. He goes, show me your way and come with us. And God goes, okay, I'll come with you. And this is what prayer does. That like faith begets more faith. Right? Obedience, more obedience. And as we see God move, it creates this desire in us to press in closer to God. Like the more God we get, the more of God we want, right? And so he had just asked, like God says, I'm sending my angel with you. He should have said, okay, but he goes, no, I want you. And he goes, so show me your way. Show me your way, God, and go with us. And God goes, okay, I'll go with you. And then in verse 18 through 23, he says, and he said, please show me your glory. Then God says, I'll make my goodness pass before you. I'll proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I'll be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I'll have compassion on whom I'll have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see my face, or shall see me and live. And the Lord said, here's a place by me. You shall stand on the rock. So it shall be while my glory passes by that I will put you in the cleft of the rock. I will cover you with my hand while I pass by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. Again, one answered prayer builds Moses' confidence and his desire for more of God. And that's what fellowship with God does. It should encourage us to go deeper with God and closer with God. And so again, he asks to see God's way. And after God gives him that thing, he goes, now show me your glory. I want more. God, I want to see you in your fullness. I want to see, God, what makes you, you. Now, I don't know if he knew exactly what he was asking here. I could see it both ways. That he's going, I don't want to go nowhere else anymore. Like, let that be the way my life ends right now. And just show me all of you, and I'll disintegrate by just worshiping you. It could be that. I don't know. It might not be that. He might just be kind of a little ignorant in his question here and going like, I just want to see you. And God goes, that's a great desire, Moses, but no one can see me face to face. I can't do that. But he does say this. He says, but I'll show you my goodness. And what I love about this, though, is that Moses just wants more of God, as much God as he can get. I know, like, it is so convicting for me to read that verse, because there are times in my life where like I pray, God answers my prayer, and then sometimes I go, okay, thanks, that's perfect, that's just fine. No, I'm good staying here. Right? I think there's times that we're willing to settle for a lot less than more of God. And we could get to a point that we just enjoy what God's given and we stop enjoying the giver. Right? And we just go, no, I'm good. This is kind of good here. Besides, this is getting kind of comfortable right here. I'll go ahead and stay right here. But to go, no, I want more. I want more of the Lord. I remember Joey Buran, Pastor Joey used to always say, never be afraid to go get all that God has for you. Keep being hungry for the things of God. Right? Isn't that what Jesus says? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Those who just want Him. Right? Not the hookup, not what God gives, but just Him. God says, I'll make my goodness pass before you. Okay, he says, Moses, you can't see my glory. I'll show you my goodness. Martin Lloyd-Jones gives this idea of what God said to Moses. He says, I'll stoop to your weakness. I'll let you see something. But much more important than that, I'll cause my goodness to pass before you. I'll give you a deeper insight and understanding into myself, into my character, into what I am. That's what you really need to know. And so what's going to happen here is God's going to put Moses there in the cleft of the rock. He'll put his hand over it, and he'll pass over Moses. Then he'll take his hand away, and then Moses can see his back as he goes. But he can't see the fullness. He can't see all of God's glory. It's a wonderful desire to see more of Him. And I think, you guys have probably heard me say this a million times, but, there's this, it's always a pretty good barometer on my own life when I'll sit and go, am I asking the question like, how close can I get to the world without it being bad? How close can I get to the line before it's sin? What's like that gray area, but the closest to the line and still be okay? That should never be the question. The question should be more like this with Moses, to go, God, how close can I get to you before my face melts? Like, how close is that line? That's really what I want to know. How close can I get to you before you say, you can't get any closer, Daniel? And that should be the prayer for those of us as believers, right? Lord, how close can I get to you then? And again, like for Moses, I mean, he got kind of the best thing anybody on earth had gotten to that point. And I'd probably maybe argue that it's probably pretty much the closest anybody's ever gotten, right? That he goes, I'll put you there in the cleft of the rock. I'll put my hand over there. Now, whether that happened right there at this moment, or because we're going to see that God proclaims his name in the next chapter, whether it happens right there, but the idea is there, right? That he's going, I can't give you what you're asking, but I'm going to give you a lot. I'm going to show you who I am. And he says, I'll make my goodness pass before you, verse 19. I'll proclaim the name of the Lord. I'll be gracious to whom I'll be gracious. I'll have compassion on whom I'll have compassion. But you can't see my face and live. Okay, chapter 34. Verses 1 to 4. He says, and the Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the first ones, and I'll write on these tablets the words that were on the first tablets which you broke. I like how he said, which you broke. Your people, you broke them. So be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself to me there on the top of the mountain. And no man shall come up with you, and let no man be seen throughout all the mountain. Let neither flocks nor herds feed before the mountain. So he cut the tablets of stone like the first one. Then Moses rose early in the morning, went up Mount Sinai as the Lord commanded him, and he took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. So similar, right, to what we had seen before, that this is going to be a holy time now, right? Moses is going to go back up on the mountain. So he says, keep the animals away from the mountain, right? The holiness of God, right? You kind of delineate that area off. Nobody's coming up. This is a holy spot. Just like, from the very beginning when Moses first encountered God, take off your sandals. This is holy ground. This is not where anyone could be. Only by invitation can Moses go up on this mountain and spend this time with the Lord. So he's going to go up there. He's got to bring 2 new tablets up there with him. God's going to give him the same law, write on them the same way. But there's a little bit of this, these are the ones that he has to bring now. And so he cuts the tablets of stone, verse 4. He gets up early in the morning. He goes up on Mount Sinai just as the Lord commanded. Now, verse 7 to verse verse 5, excuse me, verse 5 to verse 9. Now the Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of the Lord. And the Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, by no means clearing the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. So Moses made haste and bowed his head towards the earth, and he worshiped. Then he said, if now I found grace in your sight, O Lord, let my Lord, I pray, go among us, even though we're a stiff-necked people. Pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us as your inheritance. So he gets up there. The Lord descends with the cloud. And the Lord is going to do something here. He says he proclaims his own name to him. He's going to reveal who he is to Moses when he says this. And if this is where he's passing over the cleft of the rock, and that's what he's giving him is his name as he passes by, and he hears what this is, hear who this is, guys. When he says the Lord God, that's what we talked about way back in chapter 3. That he's the self-existent one, not created, in a category altogether separate. That he's eternal. That's who he is. And he starts out by saying who he is here. He says that he's merciful and gracious. Another translation could be full of compassion. That, kind of like we just sang, the Lord is gracious and compassionate. That he is full of compassion, that he's merciful, that he doesn't just give out justice all the time. And again, when people go, God of the Old Testament is different from the God of the New Testament, no, he's not. He is the same God. He's the same all the way through. That's what he says of himself right here. I am merciful. And have we not seen all through Exodus that God is indeed merciful? He is so kind to his people to not give them what they deserve, even in just these last 2 days, that he could have wiped them off the face of the earth, and he doesn't. He doesn't give them the justice they deserve when their hearts wander from him, but he's merciful. He holds back that judgment. But not only that, then not only is he merciful, he says of himself that he's gracious. What is that? To give even more, to give beyond what the people deserve. The people deserve judgment. God goes, hey, I'll send my angel before you. Is it not very gracious that God is even saying, and you know what? I will go with you. I'll continue to be with you. I'll continue to call my people. I will, in fact, take you to the land of milk and honey. I'm going to give you all the things I said I'd give you, not on the basis of who you are, but on the basis of who I am. So he's merciful. This word gracious, some talk about it that it kind of like the picture language of it is to bend or to stoop in kindness to an inferior, to favor and to bestow. I mean, that sounds pretty much like what the Lord does, right? To bend and stoop in kindness toward an inferior. That's us. That's these guys. He's long-suffering, that he suffers long. It's more than just being patient. He has this long fuse, right? It takes a long time before it gets to there. He's a long-suffering God. He's abounding in goodness and truth. So it means he's very faithful and committed to us. And he's very faithful and committed to truth. And I love that he says he's abounding in it. He doesn't just have it. Like all of us have it in some measure, right? We got a little bit of goodness, very little, very little, but he's abounding in it. That he's got plenty of it for us. And he says that he keeps mercy for thousands. I don't know about you guys, but I don't keep mercy for probably thousands. I can't imagine. I've never had to try to have mercy for thousands. I just have really 3 in my house, but it's hard to have mercy for 3. There's times, right? And But he's abounding in goodness. He keeps mercy for thousands. And then he says this, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Iniquity speaks to, this just perverting of the ways of the Lord. And transgression, we know, speaks of that deliberate sin, right? That knowing that it's wrong and still doing it anyways. And then sin, just any sort of missing the mark, whether on accident, whether on purpose. It's just, I cannot be perfect. I miss that mark of perfection. And God says, I forgive that. I forgive that. Now, he does say this, and this causes some confusion in some circles. He says that he does not clear the guilty. He says that that there's visiting of iniquity of the fathers upon the children, to the children's children, to the third and the fourth generation. Again, some can get caught up in this kind of generational curse kind of stuff. I don't know if you've ever been around people who talk about these kinds of things. We have to look at the whole Bible. And especially what we've looked at recently, just in Exodus chapter 20, when he says, I'll visit that iniquity on those who hate me, right? We see in chapter 32, just the last chapter we read, or 2 chapters ago, where all these people sin, and Moses says, man, I'll put myself in their place. He goes, no, those who have sinned, those I will blot out of my book. But some of these kind of generational curse folks really limit God and his word and his work when they make it seem like it will take anything more or less than an individual just confessing with their mouth the Lord Jesus, believing in their heart that God raised him from the dead. So now that's not to say there aren't natural behaviors that could be learned within a family, right? Oh, this guy did this and he taught it to his son did that, he taught it to his son. But never to the point of where people go, hey, I'm this generational curse breaker. I'll help you do that. That Jesus is plenty. Jesus is plenty to deal with whatever sin there is with an individual. Okay, buy this book and you'll learn how to break a generational curse. Jesus can do that. Right? Jesus can do that. I do find it interesting. There is a commentator that said it was a common Semitic idiom to express continuance when they would say to the third and fourth generation. So it could just even be just a figure of speech here that he's using. And again, to say, you guys continue being disobedient. If you continue to be distant from the Lord, and isn't it this way? That if maybe you're in here, you've walked with the Lord for a really long time. Let's say you've walked with the Lord for 30, 40 years. Say you stopped going to church for about a year. Most of us go, well, I don't want to stop going to church for a year. Well, let's just say you did. Chances are you're still going to know who God is. You'll probably still know who God is. But if you're the one that brings your kids to church and you stop going to church for maybe a year and your kids don't get to grow up in the church and they don't get to be around the things of God and they just get this real sporadic kind of knowing Jesus, then there's a better chance that they're not going to know God like you know God, right? I mean, that's just kind of like the simple, like math of it, right? That if we change our proximity from the Lord and then the next generation, sees oh, there's a million other things that are more important than church. I'll get around to it. I'll get around to the things of God when I get around to it. Now the chances of that kid's kid knowing the Lord, very slim. Now but that doesn't mean that it's oh, because you did that, now your great-grandchildren can't know God. That's not what he's saying here. That's not at all what he's saying here. So, but that's who God is. And what I love is that God says this about himself, that he says, the Lord God, merciful, gracious, long-suffering, abounding in goodness and truth, and keeping mercy for thousands. Do you remember Jonah, when Jonah complains to God? And he goes, you see, this is the problem, Lord. I knew that you were merciful and gracious and long-suffering and abounding in goodness and truth. He knew that about God. That if I give this message to the people of Nineveh, I know what you're going to do. You're going to forgive them. We'll get to Jonah eventually, probably in 10 years or something like that. We'll get there. You could read it if you want to read it. That's fine. And so what happens here in, again, verses 8 and 9, so Moses bows to the Lord, he worships him, and again, it gets, it sounds repetitive, all this stuff, but, if I found grace in your sight, he goes, oh Lord, I pray, go among us, and even though we're a stiff-necked people, go among us. And so verses 10 to 28 is a lot of like review. It's the covenant renewed. God's going to speak all the stuff he's spoken since chapter 20. He's going to do it really fast. It's kind of like the Reader's Digest version of, if you know Reader's Digest, right? Verse 10 through 28. So we'll read through the whole thing, verse 10 to 28. And he says, behold, I make my covenant. Before all your people I will do marvels, such as not have been done in all the earth, nor in any nation, and all the people among whom you are shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you. Observe what I command you this day. Behold, I'm driving out from before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Verse 12, take heed to yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you're going, lest they be a snare in your midst. We'll see that in the book of Joshua, when the people are supposed to, like God has given them everything they need to get these people out of there, to take the land that God has given them. And we'll see that even though God gave them everything they needed to displace the people, what did they do? They settled for a lot less. But he says, take heed, right? Pay attention very closely that you don't do these things. He's going to give these warnings all the way through verse 17 of the things that would make their hearts do what they just did a couple chapters ago and wander from the Lord. But he says, lest it be a snare to you. Verse 13, you shall destroy their altars, break their sacred pillars, cut down their wooden images, for you shall worship no other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they play the harlot with their gods and make sacrifices to their gods, and one of them invites you, and you eat of his sacrifice, and you take his daughters for your sons, and his daughters play the harlot with their gods, and make your sons play the harlot with their gods. You shall make no molded gods for yourselves. He says, these people, you're to put them out of the land. Don't be making treaties with them. Don't go marrying with them. Don't start mingling them, because here's what's going to happen. Your sons are going to like their daughters, and their daughters worship other gods, and then your sons, because they like those girls, are going to worship the gods that those girls worship. What fellowship has light with darkness, he would say when we get to the New Testament, right? He says we need to not be unequally yoked with those who don't follow the same God. And the person who does this, I was going to say the best, but the worst, is Solomon, right? He ends up marrying all these different women, and his heart is just torn because they worship their gods. They bring their gods with them. They begin to worship those gods. And so what is he saying? Be radical about this stuff, about what we put in front of ourselves to worship. He's telling these people, don't do it. Don't do it. Because they're going to take your heart away from God. He reminds them, verses 18 to like 24, about the different feasts. He says, the feast of unleavened bread you shall keep. 7 days you'll eat unleavened bread as I commanded you in the appointed time of the month of Abib. For in the month of Abib you came out of Egypt. All that opens the womb are mine. Remember, we talked about this before. All the male firstborn among your livestock, whether an ox or a sheep. But the firstborn of a donkey you shall redeem with a lamb. And if you will not redeem it, then you'll break its neck. All the firstborn of your sons you shall redeem, and none shall appear before me empty-handed. Verse 21, 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you'll rest. In plowing time and in harvest you shall rest. And you shall observe the feast of weeks, of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. 3 times in a year your men shall appear before the Lord God of Israel, for I will cast out the nations before you, enlarge your borders. Neither will any man covet your land when you go up to appear before the Lord these 3 times in the year. Verse 25, you shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven, nor shall the sacrifice of the feast of Passover be left until morning. And the first of the first fruits you shall Bring to the house of the Lord your God. You don't boil a young goat in its mother's milk. All these things are repetitive. We've talked about all these things already. And then verse 27, 28, then the Lord said to Moses, write these words, for according to the tenor of these words, I've made a covenant with you and with Israel. So he was there with the Lord 40 days, 40 nights. He neither ate bread nor drank water. And he wrote on the tablets, he, capital H, right? The Lord wrote on the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 commandments. Okay, so that's all really review. Verse 29, he says, now it was so when Moses came down from Mount Sinai, and the 2 tablets of the testimony were in Moses' hand when he came down from the mountain, that Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone while he talked with him. So when Aaron and all the children of Israel saw Moses, behold, the skin of his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him. Then Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the rulers of the congregation returned to him, and Moses talked with them. Afterward, the children of Israel came near, and he gave them as commandments all that the Lord had spoken to him on Mount Sinai. And when Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil over his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out, and he'd come back out and speak to the children of Israel whatever he had been commanded. And whenever the children of Israel saw the face of Moses, that the skin of Moses' face shone, then Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went to speak with him. So he's got this afterglow, right? That he has been close to the Lord. Again, couldn't see God's glory, but in all of God's goodness and all the word that God had given, and in that fellowship, like his face was like brighter, right? Like just it was shining. And he gets down, and the people are going, "You look different." Where were you? Type thing. And so they see that he looks different. This afterglow, right? This he had been with the Lord, and it kind of continues on, right, with him. And this should be a thing, very much like we talked about a few weeks ago, right? About having the fragrance of Christ for us today. That when we spend time with the Lord, and we're his, and we're his representatives on this earth, that people should see Jesus in us. That they should go, you are different than everyone around. Now, for the people, they kind of got scared. And so it says Moses hid his face from them. Now, we do get a little more insight. Moses, being a very humble man, did leave something out about his shiny face. And you guys probably know what we're talking about. In 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 13, it says that Moses, who put a veil over his face so that the children of Israel could not look steadily at the end of what was passing away. He's talking about the ministry of the old covenant versus the ministry of the new covenant. The ministry of the old covenant, it was slowly fading away. It would seem that Moses didn't just cover his face so that he wouldn't weird the people out. It seems that Moses didn't want them to see that it was getting duller and duller by the day, because he couldn't continue in that fellowship with the Lord. He had to come down off that mountain, and he had to go lead the people. And I'm sure there did come a time that Moses kind of stopped wearing the veil at some point, because his face is just kind of normal again. But he talks about what was slowly passing away. The old covenant had a glory, but it was a fading glory. God didn't want people to see the fading glory of the old covenant and lose confidence in Moses. The old covenant was great, it was glorious, but it's pale in comparison to the new covenant. A bright autumn moon may look beautiful and give great light, but it's nothing compared to the noonday sun. And that's the old covenant. Yeah, the old covenant, great. It's a wonderful covenant, but it's nothing compared to Jesus and the forgiveness that we have in him and the fellowship that we can have with him. And so let's spend that time with him. Let's enjoy our fellowship with the Lord. Sorry, that was a really long 2 chapters. We'll pray, and Thomas will come back up. We'll finish with one song of worship. Lord,